Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
So today we're going to be talking about something I think we all struggle with a little bit,
Mm,
and that's overcoming fear to achieve your dreams.
right. It's a big one, isn't it?
It really is. And we're
Yeah.
going to be using an article to kind of help us unpack all of this. The article is called Your Dreams Are on the Other Side of Fear this is Sophie today over on Medium.
Yeah. That's a pretty evocative title.
It really is. It really gets you thinking, right? And so in this article, the author starts off by sharing a personal story about how she finally achieved this long-held dream of hers to move into an off-grid tiny house.
Okay.
But she almost didn't do it because of fear.
That's so interesting how that happens, right?
It is. And, she lists out a bunch of these different fears that she had. She was afraid of not having internet access,
Uh,
not having a flushing toilet,
God.
having to cook everything on a barbecue.
Yeah, it's funny because those all sound very practical, right?
They-
But I think it's so interesting how often those practical anxieties are really just kind of a smokescreen for a much bigger fear. It's the fear of actually achieving the dream and then
Right. What happens next?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
what if it's not what I thought it would be?
I hadn't thought about it like that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's like, you climb to the top of a mountain and then, well,
Right. Then what are you going to do?
exactly.
So it sounds like what the author is getting at is that fear can actually be like a signpost,
hmm
kind of pointing us in the right direction.
Exactly. That's one of the things she really hits on in the article is that, fear can often highlight what we truly care about.
Okay.
Think about it. Like, if we don't care about something, we don't waste energy being afraid of it.
Yeah, it's true.
It's the things that we're deeply invested in, the things that truly matter to us. Those are the things that trigger those fear responses.
Okay, but if fear is pointing us towards what we care about, then wouldn't it make more sense to just avoid those things?
Well-
Just avoid the fear altogether.
It's a natural instinct, right? I think.
Yeah.
But the author suggests, and I think I agree with her, that this fear is actually a signal that we're on the right track, that we're pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone.
Okay.
And that's actually where real growth can happen.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So it's not about avoiding the fear, it's about leaning into it.
exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. It's like they say everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Right, but how do we actually get to that other side?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it?
It is. So the article talks about this idea of the discomfort zone, right?
Right.
And I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I totally get it.
Well, think of it this way, like, if you're always staying in your comfort zone, you're never really challenging yourself.
Right.
You're never really pushing yourself to grow.
So it's like a muscle, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is. If you don't push it a little bit, it's not going to get stronger.
Gotcha. So you're saying that when we step outside of that comfortable space, that's when the real magic happens.
I think so. I think about it in terms of like flow state. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I think so.
It's that feeling of being totally absorbed in an activity.
Right.
And it's usually something challenging, but not too challenging.
Right. Something you can actually achieve.
Right, exactly. And that tends to happen when we're operating right at the edge of our abilities,
Okay.
where things are just a little bit uncertain,
A little bit scary.
A little bit scary. Yeah,
So if we're not feeling at least a little bit of fear,
right.
we're probably not pushing ourselves enough.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah. And so to kind of help us manage those feelings of fear and uncertainty, when we're in that discomfort zone.
Yeah.
The article brings up this really interesting concept from Stoic philosophy, and it's called
Well, here we go.
premeditatio malorum.
Premeditatio malorum.
Yes.
Okay. That sounds pretty intense.
I know, right? It sounds a little scary, but
Yes. It's not as bad as it sounds, I
Oh, yeah.
promise.
Okay.
It basically translates to the premeditation of evils,
The premeditation of evils.
but it's not about like being negative or dwelling on the worst possible outcomes.
Okay.
It's more like a mental dress rehearsal for your fears.
So, like playing out all the worst case scenarios in my head.
Kind of, but the key difference between this and just catastrophizing is the action component.
Okay.
So it's not about panicking. It's about planning.
So instead of being like, oh my God, what if this happens? What if that happens?
Right.
I'm saying, okay, what if this happens? What's my plan?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like having an escape route planned out in case of a fire.
Right, right. I like that.
You know, you don't have to think about it in the moment.
Right.
You want to have it all figured out beforehand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And-
So how does this actually work in practice?
Well, let's take an example. Like, let's say you're thinking about starting your own business.
That's a huge goal, right? And I'm sure it comes with a lot of fears, like fear of failure, fear of financial instability, what if people don't like your product?
Like all of that.
Right. So instead of letting those fears just paralyze you, you can use this idea of premeditatio malorum to actually address them.
So would I like sit down and make a list of like all the worst things that could happen?
Exactly. And for each one of those things,
Okay.
you come up with a plan.
Okay.
So what if nobody buys my product?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I need to revamp my marketing strategy.
Okay.
What if I run out of funding? Maybe I need to look into some alternative funding options.
So it's about shifting from a place of like fear and paralysis to a place of action
Exactly, and preparedness.
and preparedness. I like that a lot.
It can be really empowering, because the more you do this, the less scary those fears actually become.
Right.
Because you realize they're not these insurmountable walls.
Right.
They're just hurdles that you can overcome.
This is reminding me of the author's story about the tiny house. Like she was obviously really scared to make that move. Yeah. But she did it anyway.
And it's a great example of how those fears can be disguised as, these practical concerns.
Exactly like she was worried about the internet, the toilet, the
Yeah.
cooking,
Right.
which are all valid concerns. But I think underneath all of that was probably this deeper fear of actually achieving her dream and then having to deal with whatever came next.
Exactly. And once you took the leap and actually did it,
Yeah.
those fears pretty much went away.
It sounds like the article said she found solutions. She adapted. She realized that a lot of those things she was worried about never even happened.
Right. It's so often like that.
Yeah.
We tend to overestimate the difficulty of things
Yeah.
and underestimate our own resilience.
Yeah. It really is true, though, that everything you want, IS on the other side of fear.
It really is. And that's something I really hope people take away from this deep dive,
Yeah.
Fear is a natural part of life.
It is.
We all experience it, but it doesn't have to control us.
Right. It's
Yeah.
more like you were saying before. It's like a compass.
Exactly.
It's pointing us toward the things that really matter,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a little scary to get there.
Exactly. And, it's in those moments of discomfort
Yeah.
when we choose, courage over comfort.
Right.
That's where we find our greatest strengths. That's
Yeah.
where we create the most meaningful experiences.
So as we're wrapping up, here's a little something for everyone listening to think about.
Okay.
What's one thing that you've been putting off out of fear?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah, it could be anything. It could be a career change or a creative project or even just a difficult conversation you need to have.
Right.
Whatever it is, big or small, think about what it would look like to face that fear.
Hmm.
And like we were talking about before,
Mm.
what would it look like to approach it like a stoic?
Yeah. Could you use that idea of premeditatio malorum?
Right.
Could you plan for those worst case scenarios, come up with some solutions, and then take action?
And remember, you're more capable than you think you are. And you might just surprise yourself with what you can achieve when you push past that fear.
So true. Well, until next time.
Happy exploring, everyone.
Happy exploring.